Welcome back. In this video, we will go through, or we'll continue the work. So in this video, we'll continue the work we did in the previous videos, finishing off our UI for logging into our backend. So let's get right to it. Here we have the code we started on. And so yesterday, or in the previous video, we implemented all the base login things. So we have this wrapper for login required. We have actions for storing the state of being logged in, and so on and so forth. And we are now about to implement the login form. And so the login form will be the first place we start. And as usual, we have a bunch of dependencies we'll start out by including. So we have our auth login form that we defined on our API, and then we have a few different types we need to implement or to import. The validator error, a JS cast trait, which allows us to cast from one type to another in JavaScript, or in the corresponding JavaScript on the back end. Wow, I'm really rambling right now. That's completely wrong. Let's do that again. So we are importing JS cast so we can cast between different native types in the browser. And that's basically the core purpose of this trait. So we will start out by defining the properties of our form. So we're going to have a public struct with some login form properties. And there will be a callback. So once you submit the form, we want to have a callback that allows us to call back and say with the login data that we have generated. Likewise, we'll have a loading, which will be shown whenever we are in the process of either verifying the login or in other ways loading. And then we'll have an error, which is an optional error string we can show on the UI string. Okay. Then the login component itself is a function component, just like all our other components, that returns HTML. And inside of here, we are going to have a state, which is the form. We're also going to have email errors, which is just containing a validation error, and for starters it's containing a empty one. And finally we're going to have a password error, or password errors, a vector of password errors. Okay. Then we are defining a generic input change handler. So this will be an element that, or a callback function we are using just to update the change. We could do two handlers, but it's much easier just to switch on what field we are manipulating. So we're going to do that. And this will take an input event. The input event, we are then going to have the input element. And this is where we are using the JS cast property, because this allows us to cast this target element into a HTML input element. So the target is a generic DOM element, and we're now casting that into a input HTML element. And we're doing that unchecked because we don't really expect any errors to happen here. So then let's get the data. That's just a form we are cloning, or the content of the form. Right, and now we will do match name.as_str. Oh, but before we do that, we need to get the name. So this is done by doing name value, and then we simply just do input element.name, input element.value. And this one is actually just a single line, so we don't need to make a whole block for it. We're just going to do email value. And the same for the password. And we need to have this wildcard here at the end, because basically strings can be anything. So we need to have a case where we are matching, or where we're fixing things. We need to have the case where the string that's inside of name is neither of these two. And actually, I'm going to make this into a panic, because this should never happen. And if it happens, we just want to know. Okay, and last thing we do is set the form data. And then since this is a value, we'll have a semicolon here at the end. Likewise, we are going to implement a onBlur function, and we're going to implement a onSubmit function. So this is going to be a callback from, we just do move event focus event. Oh. And likewise, we will have a submit handler as well. Okay. And that is about as far as it goes with the callback. Oh, wait, did I changed the name twice now. Let's just fix that. Okay, this is about as far as it goes for handlers we need. For the blur handler, we are going to add the form, we're going to add the email errors, and we're going to add the password errors. And so the purpose of this one is that when you change fields, we want to do a validation of the field itself. We don't want to do that on every character. We only want to do that when it loses, when either of the fields are losing focus. And so the key idea here is to validate things as soon as the form loses focus. And so we do the same as we did in the previous part. We are getting the input element. From the input element, we're getting the name, and we're getting the data, and we are going to check if the data validates. If it doesn't validate, that's when we are going to add the errors. And this pretty much matches what we did in the previous. So we're first checking if there are field errors, and if there are field errors, we are going to find those field errors and just set the corresponding errors in accordance with in accordance with the name that we're actually having. So we're getting the field errors for the name. If that is successful, then we will go ahead and we will just figure out where do we need to set this error. If there are no errors, in that case, we'll just empty or clear the errors in the respective field. So, and finally, the first part here is field specific. So so here we check if there are errors for that specific field, and we're checking if there are errors, and if there's not errors for that specific field, we are clearing that specific field. And otherwise, in the general case where there are no errors at all, we're just going to clear all errors. Okay, so that was our input this was our blur handler. Then we need our form submission. And again, we have a bunch of different we have a bunch of different variables that we we have a bunch of different variables we need for the unsubmit. And I can see here, let's see, I think we have messed up the event. So this event needs to go here, and the focus event needs to go on the blur, right? So yes, so we're copying the on form submit, and with that, the first thing we want to do is prevent default. If we don't prevent the default, the form will submit using either get or post, and we will basically reload the whole page. We do not want to do that. Similarly, we are now to what we did in the previous. We're copying the data. Then we validate the data. And so we simply just run data.validate, and if there are errors, we're checking, okay, do we get any errors for the email field? Do we get any errors for the password field? And if we do, we're going to return early. And finally, once we have validated things, we will call our callback onSubmit. In this way, we're sure that whatever goes into the onSubmit has already been validated and is valid data for submission. So we don't need to worry about that in the subsequent components. Last thing we need to do for the form is return some HTML. And this is relatively straightforward. Once you get access to the course, you will have these snippets you can just copy in. It's a lot of writing and a lot of markup. So we'll just leave it here for now, but it's basically just a basic form that shows you the alerts with the errors. Then it has an email input for the email address. It has an input for the password and a button to access the wallet. And if we are loading, we're just changing the text slightly so we can see that we're loading with a spinner. And that's pretty much it. Let's check that this one compiles before we move on. Let's check that we have added it here. We have added that one there, so that means that it should be in the compile tree. And last thing we just want to check is, do we have it in the front end itself? We do not, so we're going to add it here to make sure that this compiles with the of password. And together with this, we're also going to import the auth screens we did yesterday. Okay, let's see. Oh, goodness me, nothing compiles. That is to be expected though. Login form. So we missing a semicolon somewhere. Let's see, that's after the input handler, or before the input handler, actually. So that's a semicolon here we need. Right. Have we? No, we have imported 0 dependencies. So that's something we want to change, because obviously we need to have dependencies that we need for this imported or declared in the cargo.toml file. And so this is just completely standard. It's more or less the same dependencies as we're using everywhere else, except that we have a few more screens up here that we're using. So we're using the password auth API, we're using the auth API, the auth screens, and the app config from the things that we've made ourselves. Okay, let's see if we can just get that one to trigger rebuild. And right, we have glue console that has snuck itself in here. We don't use glue console. Instead, if we want to do locking, we would be using the lock crate. Wasn't bind gen, that's a good one. That one we haven't added yet, so let's just go to crates.io and then just get that one in. So wasn't bind gen is a library that allows you to do bindings to the JavaScript environment and basically invoke things there, which is a super, super useful thing. So if you have a JavaScript library and you want to use that inside of Rust, you can use wasn't bind gen to write bindings for it, and yeah, just have a great day. So in that way, you can still tap into the whole JavaScript community and ecosystem. And oh, what's going on here? So wait a second. Do we not define this base URL? We do not. Okay. So one of the things we need is the base URL. Let's see. Let's start out by just checking that we do not have websys in here. So we will start out by adding that one. So we're copying websys across. And the next thing we want to do is create this function get base URL. Okay. So if you recall yesterday, we did our first request to the backend inside of Auth, of the Auth screen. And as I explained, the key difference to using a browser is that it will not use the base URL by default, because the libraries we're using are not necessarily web-centric, which means that they will expect to have the fully qualified URL. And so what we do is we create this base URL that allows us to define what the URL should be. And so inside of this one, we do exactly what we would expect the browser to normally do. Just get the current location and then use that. And in our case, we're going to extend it a little bit and just add, just push the API. This will make sure that we always have the URL we on /API, and we can just concentrate then on using the API paths inside of that. Okay, so that should fix that. Let's have a look what the next issue is. Okay, misspelling. I am just wondering, we probably need to add a feature to our cargo.toml. Let me just check that. Okay, so, right. We have briefly talked about this before, but I want to mention this again. In particular, if you're coming from the JavaScript or Python environment, this will be a bit strange to you. But basically what we have here is we have a function. So I'm trying to call this function response.json, and I get back, this does not exist from the compiler. And so the reason for this is that Rust has this really, really nice feature where you can gate certain parts of the code. This makes it that you only include the code that is actually relevant to what you want to do. And so request does not allow you to pass JSON immediately. You will need to enable the JSON feature for that. And so we are going to do that here and just do JSON features. And actually, while we are at it, we're going to, no, I think this is fine. Let's just stick with JSON. I think that should work just fine. And JSON state email. That is a little bit strange. So I think, could it be that we in the state called it username? Oh, wait, that's the wrong place we're looking. We need to go here. Form. Let's jump back here and say state. This is in actions. Okay. And what line are we on? We are on line 80. Okay. I thought we had defined, no, we call that user. Right, so we don't have that in the actions. We actually only have we have that again there. Let's see how this, if this fixed things for us or made it worse. Hopefully it fixed things for us. Still have a couple of errors we need to deal with. Expected RC. So this is in our state reducer. Under actions, we probably need to do RC:u. Let's just check out if that is the case. Right, so actually what we need to do here is we need to, okay, let me explain this bit because that might be slightly confusing. We're just returning the original state. And then that should fix our issue. And it did. Right, so this function, our reducer, expects us to return the reference to the auth state, so a reference counted version. And so the first thing we actually do is we take the original state and we make it into a mutable, and that mutable we then mutate. But that will also, because it's a reference counted thing, because it's a reference counted object, it will also update the original state. And so what we do at the end is just return the original state, because that one has now been updated, and the mutable goes out of scope after that. Okay. Right, thank you. We do not have a logo. And thank you, we do not have a login. Do we not have a login? I thought we had defined login. Okay, so that means that the next thing we want to do is we want to define a few routes here. And so those routes will be for logging in and for all the new views that we're basically creating. And so basically we had 3 new views that we are going to have. It's sign up, it's login, and it's a thank you page. Thank you for signing up. And together with that, we need to check if we have a wildcard in our app for routes. And we do not at the moment. So you see, we need to explicitly here match all of the routes that we are looking at. And if we go back to our compilation, this will be the next error we are getting, that this is not right. Login form, that one we need to fix, but also and logo, that we need to fix. Logo. Okay, we will also get we're just going to add HTML and that will make sure that we are always producing some HTML regardless of the routes. We need to make sure we save this one. Then once we have saved that one, we're going to jump back to the thank you screen where we've copied some code that okay. So that should fix that. Let's see. Auth form default. So we haven't declared auth login form, and this is in the login form. That's because we've misspelled it. It needs to be spelled like that. Okay, let's go. We have things compiling now, so that's the login form. We'll copy the entire login form and just put it on the sign up form. The sign up form is very, very similar to the login form, except that it's for sign up. So the first thing we'll do is sign up, and then probably we should just add a few different things. So we could do things like entering the password twice here. I don't really feel that that's necessary. This is a great exercise for you to just play around with something little. If you want to have some experience with modifying things outside of what we're doing here, adding the password validation with the second password is a fun little thing that you can do, which will not be too hard. And at the same time, yeah, it is not something that's strictly necessary. I think most places where they still use password, they've actually completely abandoned that, because you always have the forgot password, which is a slightly more involved exercise to do. But that's also an exercise you can do to get some experience with doing some Rust stuff on your own. Okay, let's see. And then this auth sign up form. So we need to recall what we actually called this one. go to the API of use login. We called it Auth login sign up form. That's a very long name. Okay, sign up form is done. So we have the layout, we have the login form, we have the sign up form, and now we're going to do the login form. Actually, let's do the sign up form first. Cool. Okay, so the sign up form, well, not the sign up form, we're going to do the sign up page. The sign up page is only going to have a single parameter. So we want to have the sign up page such that it has a next query parameter. And in the case that that one is set, we want to redirect the user to that once we are signed up or signed in, really. And I think that would be about it. Or maybe it's better just to skip that for now and then keep things simple. Yeah, you know what? Let's skip that for now and just start out with importing the dependencies that we're going to need for this. Right, so we have all the usual dependencies. We're just going to ignore that. And then we'll make an empty sign up parameter. So one thing we could do as an extension here would be to add a optional query parameter next, which we would then set in some local storage, and you would redirect the user to it once the user has signed in. But we're not going to do that. We're going to leave that for now and just keep things simple. We do need to have a redirect. Well, actually, maybe we don't need to have a redirect. We would need a redirect if we were doing that. But what we do need is a perform sign up. Right, and so to make this interesting, we're going to make a perform sign up with a callback function, which we call f. This is just a generic parameter, which we call set error, and then f. Then we're going to have a payload, which will be the auth login sign up form, and the navigator, which will allow us to redirect to the thank you page once you have signed up. And then where, so we need to set some requirements for our generic parameter f. So this is going to be an fn1 callback option string. So we'll take an optional string plus it will be static. And with that, we can make the function body. We serialize the credentials, we get the base URL, and then since this is a synchronous function, we'll need to spawn an asynchronous context where we can do the work that we need to do. And so the request is really just calling the v1 auth register. So this was the backend URL we made for registering. We are adding the content type. We are making sure to include credentials. And that's about it. And so this will either succeed or it won't succeed when we send it. And so we send it and just look out for errors, right? And so what we do here is we send and await, then we get a response. If the response is okay, then we're checking the status code. If the status code is okay, we are going to change the URL into thank you for signing up. But rather than pushing it as we've done in other places, we're going to replace it so when you press back, you get to the page you were at before you signed up. So you don't go back and try to sign up again. Cool. And otherwise, if it wasn't 200, we're going to set the error response. So we're going to set the error using our callback function, and you'll see we do this in quite a few different cases. Either we have a message from the backend saying this was not okay. If we don't have a message, we're going to say that there was an API error. And finally, if the request failed altogether, we're also going to set the error in that case. And with this, we are ready to do our sign-up component. And so this is just going to be another function component. And the state we'll have is we'll start out by getting the auth store that we defined in a previous video. We'll get the state and we'll get the dispatcher. Then we'll get the navigator that allows us to navigate. We'll have a generic error that we can set, which is different to the form errors that's handled by the form. And we'll have a loading state. And let's see. Okay. So we will implement this redirect on next in just a bit, because I think even though I said it's too much for this video, let's just do it. I think it's a fun little thing to do. Okay, but the first thing we want to do is the ability to handle the submission, right? And for that, we'll need the following. We need the dispatcher for updating our state. We need the generic errors, so we can set the generic error. We want to be able to set whether we're loading or not loading, and we want to be able to change the location we're on. And then the signature of the callback was a function that takes a single argument, the sign-up form, and this is what we'll be passing into our sign-up form. And then inside of here, we are simply just going to say, yeah, at this point we are loading, and we're cloning the variables we have. Then we're setting the generic error to, or we're creating our callback for setting the generic error, saying, okay, this is an optional string that's taken as argument. If we set the error, we're going to stop loading, and then we're going to say this is the generic error. And finally, with that, we are ready to perform the sign-up itself. And the final thing we want to do in this view is simply just doing our HTML. We need a semicolon here because it's a value we are creating, or we're creating this handle submit, and when you do that inside of block, you need a semicolon. The final thing we're doing is creating our layout. So we've defined the layout login layout previously, and we're just adding a little bit of boilerplate code, adding our sign-up form, and having some of the usual stuff you'd see, like if you already have a wallet, let's allow the user to easily go to the login page. Okay, let's see if this compiles. Right. We don't actually need the dispatcher there. Okay, that compiles. Next question, does it work? I surely hope so. Let's try to go back to our main application. Which we have here. We're now going to use auth password screens. And then we have the sign up component. Okay, and that one we don't export directly, so we're going to do like this, sign up. And then we also want to have a few other things. So from our, actually did we not place it under components? I thought we did. Let's just check. Oh no, we placed it under pages, didn't we? Pages. So I'm a bit surprised that it says that we need to import it from. Right, and we are exporting. Okay, I see. Yeah, okay, cool. Let's just do this pub use login star. So we're just re-exporting everything, which will make it available in the root. So we do this, and let's just check that we're also re-exporting things here. That one is being re-exported. Is it being re-exported here? It is. Okay, cool. So getting back here, we should now be able to do this and just check that that's compiling. In the meantime, let's get the login required and the auth store. This will allow us to check if the user was already authenticated and put a guard on all the other things like the setup screen and all of that. You shouldn't be able to do any of these things until you've signed in. And things are compiling, which means that now things are being exported from the right places. So let's start out by adding a guard to all of these things. And actually, we will do just like this. And so if you recall, our login required is a generic component that takes a route component or routable as a parameter, and then it has this fallback which allows us to say, well, if you are not logged in, we are going to redirect you to this particular page, right? And so for now, we are just going to add everybody to the same here. All of these views we're going to add to the same. Oh. Okay, let's see what happens if we go to localhost. I think it was 8080. Okay, so something went wrong here. We haven't guarded our setup. Right, setup should also redirect us. Well, actually, let's just wait with that and just test that the rest works. So we are here, we do, and you see we're getting redirected to our to-do view. This is great. It shows that it actually works the way that we want it to work. Now all we need to do is a little bit of changing of the logic here. So a little change to the logic here. So we are going to make it such that when we render, we are only rendering this thing if we're not authenticated and the wallet, or if we are authenticated and the wallet is none, then we're rendering the setup. And otherwise, we will go ahead and render according to the URL. So this is a very, very specific case we need to deal with. And this also means that if we save this now, instead of the setup screen, we ought to see a to-do. But let's see if that actually happens. Surprisingly, okay, that did happen. Let's just see, what if we go here? Yeah, so what you see happening now is that when we go on the root, it will redirect us to log in because we're not logged in. And that is great. We probably also want to add slightly more logic here eventually. So eventually we're going to have something here like to do load wallet if authenticated. We'll not do that right away, but we'll do that in just a bit. For now, let's do login and sign up. Putting those ones on the same for now, on the same or generating the same code for these two routes. And we're simply just going to show the login, the sign up screen here. Right. And then we also want to have the thank you page. And that one, did we remember to import that one? We did not. We've already made that one, so let's just add it. Well, or have we? Yeah, we have. Cool, okay. Which means that with this, we should be able to test the sign-up flow at this point. Okay, something went wrong. Okay, we need some commas. Alrighty, build failure. It does not say, oh, okay, we need to get to the success. Okay, now it shows this one again. That's a bit surprising. Why would it show that one? It's actually completely unexpected. Let's just try to comment this out for now. We'll get that into the flow in just a bit. But it surely isn't supposed to show that one. Which means that this one would be marked as authenticated. We don't even do this. So what's gone wrong? User is some. Let's just check. That would mean that we in the local storage would have, but we don't have anything. So that's not supposed to happen. So we have a logical error here somewhere. Oh, wait. Oh my goodness. I am right. Okay. I am just confusing myself. I'm looking at the screen and I think I see something and it's actually not true. Right. So what we see here is indeed our sign up form, and I just confused myself because it says create wallet. I confused it with our previous setup screen, which is for setting up the wallet once you have created your right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Well, let's try this out. See what happens. So I'm curious what will happen on the back end and on the front end. So we're just going to clear the logs here so we can see what actually happens when we press this button. Not much. That was an anticlimax. Oh, okay. So did we forget to... Okay. So to debug this, we will add the login crate. And let's just start out by doing :info hello sign up. Just to check that we have set this one up correctly. Otherwise we might... Right, that's rebuilding. Okay, so to make things slightly easier for ourselves, we're going to use the glue console. If you're coming from a JavaScript background, then that is a very familiar kind of feel. Just adding glue console. Before we copy that. Adding glue console here. And then basically inside of here we do glue console. Okay. Hello. So the glue console, in my experience, has been a lot easier to use. There's a lot less setup with it, if I recall correctly. Normally for getting the locking crate to work, you need to add a few things to your main function. We'll do that in just a bit, but I want to show you both here. Right, so we see hello. If we just stick with the logger, you'll see that that one does not immediately show you anything. See, right now we only see glue console. So glue console is definitely the easier one of the two to use. I personally like using the logger more because it just allows you to integrate much better with everything inside of Rust. But for now, let's stick with glue console, right? And so what we basically want to know is, are we ever getting here? And we also want to go to the sign up form and so we see we get to the submit callback, but we actually do not get to the second callback. So we were here, but for whatever reason, it seems like we're returning here, right? Because we never get to that point down here. Let's just add a few more statements to check that. Oh. Yeah, okay, so we're returning early there, and actually we do not manage to Name is required. Okay. So it seems like we had a name in our sign up form as well. I completely forgot about this when we copied everything across. Right, that means that we need to copy an entire field here and add a name. Cool. And because we've made generic logic, we can basically reuse all of the other logic here. So all we need to do is add name, and the same here. And let's see, that should do the trick. So we've added name back in everywhere, and this should allow us to sign up nice and easily. Oh, wait. Name errors. Right, we need to copy things in as well. So, oh, right, we are copying things in, but we forgot to actually define the variable name. And we also forgot to add it here, so we set the value name. So let's just see, email name, name copied. Okay, I think we should be good to go. Cool. So it now asks for our name, troels@oneup.com. Method not allowed. Why would it do that? Okay, let's have a look here what's happening. Method not allowed. So this one allowed. Interesting. So I wonder if we have an error on our backend. But anyway, so now it's submitting the request. We don't need these ones anymore. And what API? So we did API v1 auth register. So let's check our backend. We have course very permissive. We have a bunch of other things. API v1 register. So right, I see the error here. Right, we are currently serving our front end on port 8080, but we are serving the backend on port 8000. What we need to do is we need to attach a redirect to our front end such that the API calls are redirected to the backend. This is what we are missing. The way we do this is we go back to the front end, we go to trunk.toml, let's just shut the server down, and then inside of here we're going to define a proxy. And so what we need is just a proxy section saying backend, and here's where where you should redirect things to. And that's pretty much it. That should fix all our problems. Okay, internal server error. That's slightly better. Handling error. Let's see what happened here. Okay, so we get a panic in services. Not yet implemented. Okay, that's kind of what we don't want. Not yet implemented. What is it that's not implemented? 87. Oh, we forgot to implement the create user function. Yeah, it's kind of hard to sign up when you can't create a user. We basically only implemented all of the checking whether the user exists functionality. Let's just fix that right away. Okay, so the create user, there's really not much to it. Basically, all we're going to do is we're making a single SQL query where we are inserting the user, username, role, all of this into the table. Then we are binding the values using the pool. If we fail, we'll log out an error and create a bad request. And otherwise, we return the user. Let's try to do this and then restart our backend. Let's just submit with the same form. See, hey, we have signed up for our wallet. Next thing we need to do is get the login to work. So we are almost there. Sign up process seems to be working. And now all we need to do, oh, bloody hell. That was very unintended. Okay, now all we need to do is finish our sign up page or our login page. And so luckily this one is going to be very similar to the sign up. So if we start out by just copying across what we already have, then this is going to be a login form. Well, in fact, let's just scratch that. Do login. And this one up here is just going to be, wait, that's just going to be login. There's no two logins. Then sign up. It's going to be login. And that's at least a start. But we also need to change the URL here. And so for this one, we'll change the register to login. And then I think we want to change the inner logic here slightly, right? So when we get a response, the response that we'll be passing for is the user response. And if we do get a user, what we really want to do is we want to set the user in our state. And I think that would be the main difference. And then here it should say login. Let's just remove all of the wallet stuff. We know that we're doing stuff with a wallet. And access it here. Sign up. Right. And this would be down. Sign up. Here. Okay. I think there is a space there. Okay, that looks more or less correct. Do we compile? The answer is no. We have an error somewhere. Rested data is not defined in this scope. Still having an error. Right, we also need the actions to be able to do this, so I'm slightly confused. I thought we would, oh no, we weren't doing any actions before, right? Before we were just redirecting to the page, but now we need to dispatch, and we also, so in order to do this, we actually need the dispatch function here, right? So we cannot just have perform login. We need to have a dispatcher to the auth store, which will pop in here as the second argument, because we need the dispatcher inside of the callback here, or of the async context we have here, because we want to dispatch that we are now signed in and that everything is great. And then on this part here, we want to take the dispatcher, we want to clone that, we want to add that here such that we are dispatching correctly. Let's see if this will do the trick. And we should be there in just a bit. And we need to import the response as well. So this is coming from user login response. In the meantime, let's go back to our app and do a separate route for this, and we're just copying this one across, then changing this to login, and we need to import login up here since I don't think we are already doing that. For that we need to find auth passwords, and that is here, so we'll do that. Getting back to our login page, let's figure out what else is wrong. It appeared that it compiled the last time, and it seems to compile again. Okay, let's try to refresh on the root of this. It now gives us a login page. So this will be really exciting to see if we can log in with our previously created user. And it does. We have logged in. So if we go to our application over here in our thing, we'll see it has now created the whole thing with what is our user ID and all of this. And we can now create our test thing and then encrypt that with a separate password. And wait a second, that brings us back to this one. Why does that bring us back to this one? Oh. So we are logged in now. Right, okay, I see the problem here. So I don't know if you notice this, but basically what happens is we do not have any redirect on the login page, right? So everything's working, we logged in, we've created our wallet, but the last thing we need to do is this thing of redirecting. So if we're going to the login page while being logged in, we should obviously redirect to something more sensible. Let's do that. It seems like a very, very small last step to do. Right, and let's just start out by saying, well, actually, we're going to just do a pub next option string. So what we'll be trying to do here is extract the redirect from the query parameters. And so we match next. And we might have none. And so if we have none, we're simply just going to replace this with the dashboard URL. In fact, let's just do that in any case. And then say this is our initial redirect, and then we just add a to do here to do something with the path. And then here we don't need these locking functions anymore, but we actually have a to do for it here that we wanted to do this, right? And so the way we are going to do this is we will be using a few different things. So first of all, let's start out by deleting the comment. Then we do let location equal use location dot unwrap. Next, we get the login parameters equal match location dot query login parameters. Okay, v login parameters. Next, none. So we just extract a set of reasonable login parameters in case we need to use those ones. And then we do let auth equal auth.clone. And so we create a subscope here to make sure that we clone the auth, and then once we leave the scope, we are back to the original auth. Login parameters and navigator. Okay. Let's see if this compiles and then get the errors fixed. What are we doing wrong here? Line 21. So we need a comma here and we need a closing here. That should at least fix some of the issues. Still have another error. Login parameters. Right. And navigator, we haven't defined the navigator, have we? Oh no, we just need to clone it. Alrighty, let's see if this works. Let's try to do /login. That does not seem to redirect us, but I guess the setup screen, right, okay. So that's because the setup screen is overriding what we're doing, but now it should be redirecting us, and it does, right? So now our setup screen, once we've set up things, we're redirected to where our wallet is. We have our 10,000 ETH that we can start sending around to people. And so we can go here, we can transfer to whoever we did that in the previous, where we do something like this. And we have the transaction confirmed, the money is taken off our account. And so where we're at now is we can sign up, we can log in, we can send transactions, we can set up a wallet, and all we need to do now is the last piece where we're storing the encrypted wallet on the back end. And I think that pretty much concludes today's live stream. We have come really, really far with our wallet, and you have a very broad spectrum of things that we have been doing. Like we've been working with some Web3, we have been building a front end in Rust, we've been building a back end in Rust using Axiom, we have been building the API and all the various bits. So it's all starting to come together now. The last bit we need to do is save the wallet on the back end and just do slightly better management of our login state, our wallet keys and all of this. And with that, we have a foundational wallet that we could work more on and evolve into something more advanced. I hope you enjoyed the video. I really enjoy making the videos. So if you enjoy it, please like, follow, and